I just bought Dave from Dailydrivenexotics abandoned gated manual Ferrari 599, and this thing is super cool and super broken. And in this video, we're going to break down everything that this car currently needs, the story of how it got here, what it's doing here, and what we're gonna do with it. And then hopefully we're going to try and get this thing fired up for the first time in quite a while. If you guys are seeing this video, it means that this car has been fully purchased and it is now mine and my problem, for better or for worse. But for me in real time, Damon and Dave are very awesome. And rather than me going through with a pre-purchase inspection or something similar, this poor car has bounced around a good bit and been a little bit here, there, and everywhere. And they elected just to send it to me over here in Alberta so I could go through the car myself. And I have a couple weeks to do so, rather than go through all the trying to communicate, because it was just going to be easier. So if you're me in this current moment, I'm fairly confident we're buying the car, but as of yet, I still have a couple things to look over before finalizing this deal for certain. And namely, I want to get this thing fired up, hear how the engine sounds, and see how healthy the car feels overall for whatever we can before finalizing that purchase decision. The due diligence I have been able to do outside of that, I have been very happy with. Overall, the car is in very good shape. And it's quite funny because really, even though the car needs a lot of work, it's not really broken, it's just missing pieces. Because Damon and Dave have two of these cars. They have this one that's black underneath, or had this one that's black underneath, that's wrapped gold, as well as Damon also had his car, which originally was black, and now has been painted to a beautiful blue. Both of these cars are original non-US market cars, which ironically thins the market for them a little bit because they can only be sold in Canada as vehicles that are imported that aren't yet 25 years old to match the 25-year rule down south. They had the two of these cars. They gated converted both of them. They put Valvetronic exhausts on both of them and coilovers on both of them. Had some fun, played around with them, drifting them on the block. These cars have seen some use.
I don't want to break it. I really don't want to break it.
It's a very good use of the last little bit. And it's funny because this thing looks like a cluster with all the parts that are over here, but it's really not so bad. Damon's car, the other car, hit a K-rail and ended up bursting a passenger airbag on the door. So the entire side of this car has been pulled apart to cannibalize the door airbag as well as the seat belt, because they had, well, I'll preface it a little bit, but they had a deal to sell the blue car to somebody that ended up falling through, and they took the parts needed from this car to get that car up to snuff before doing so. So those parts were stolen from the inside, and those are still out, and this was all disassembled. Outside of that, the interior is in really good shape. There is some cutout here from where they had installed a hydro e-brake, and somebody managed to break the AC control panel, which is really funny because the backing plate is still in there. The cable is not plugged into anything, and the knobs are right here without any of the electrical components that they're supposed to control. That is definitely something that we're gonna have to replace. The airbag and the seat belt, we actually have new ones from a part out car that came with this thing to get installed, and we just kind of have to put the interior back together outside of that. Then, if we go one step further and we look in the engine bay, it's kind of the same story. It looks like it's very apart, but it's nothing too crazy because most of it was just to steal a few parts needed for the other car. Namely, this thing currently does not have an alternator and an associated bracket and kind of heat shield that's supposed to go with it. Of course, the intake has been pulled out to get access to that, as well as some of the trim paneling here. We are missing our brake master cylinder, which is kind of a bummer, but it's not going to be too bad. You can see the brake booster is still there, but there is the two brake lines that are supposed to be plugged into the brake master cylinder, as well as the little electrical plug. And then it is a little bit more subtle, but there's actually a PCV valve that was stolen here with this cut line as well that is missing. Again, besides that, the engine bay is quite complete. The engine is supposed to be happy and healthy. The clutch, the transmission, the differential, all that's supposed to be happy and healthy. These few select things were just stolen to get the other car up to snuff. And outside of the bits missing from the interior and the bits missing from the engine bay, there is still a few other things that we're gonna have to replace that, however they went missing along the line, whether this car didn't come with him, the other car didn't come with him, or whatever else, there is still a few things. We are missing a battery tie down right there. We're missing a couple of the interior trunk panels. We have some of them, but not all of them over there. The rear toe arms are supposed to be fried because, of course, if you spend a bunch of time sliding around and doing burnouts in a car like this, it is hard on the suspension components to try and keep the wheel straight. Beyond that, everything I just ran through is the list I was given from the inspection of this car, and it seems congruent with everything I'm seeing thus far. I still gotta lift this car up and take a peek underneath because I have not yet been underneath of this car, and I really do want to get it fired up, partially to hear the insane equal length headers, crazy exhaust that's on this car, as well as confirm its health before paying for the car. But overall, I'm super happy with this thing. Up on jack stands we are. Let's get underneath this thing and see how bad or good that it is. I have not yet been under here. Make sure you guys cross your fingers and toes for me. Let's get under this thing. Well, immediately, we're definitely missing, I think the power steering pump is what's supposed to be here, or whatever was there for one is no longer there. I think that's the custom bracket they had made. Beautiful headers, a little bit of oily residue, and a clutch that doesn't look that unhappy, even if there is a little bit of oil seepage around it. Of course, our torque tube, a little bit of oil residue on the back of the cylinder heads. As far as stuff like that goes, we're definitely going to see some of that because this car's been sitting forever. It's going to be really hard to tell how many of the residue fluid spots under here are actually worthy of concern versus not, just based on how long the car's been sitting. Some coolant lines, thermostat housing, of course, there is where our missing alternator is. AC compressor. So it looks like the power steering pump setup has been stolen, which is quite unfortunate. But that's not the end of the world. There's a lot of oily residue up here, and I'm not sure what that would be from. These would be our equalization lines, I'm sure, to and from the dry sump. I guess our dry sump and probably our dry sump drain bolt would be my guess there. And that all looks dry, which is good. Let's move along to the back. This, see, that is gonna need fixed. We can see here, this is the really cool linkage apparatus thing for the gated manual conversion. This cross brace had to be modified, if I was going to guess, so that's definitely not factory, to make sure there's clearance for this. And I bet you a buck, we might have to get this re-welded up. It looks like there's a crack there. Well, this is kind of upside down for you, but it looks like there's a crack there. As well as, yep, there's one back here too, and this definitely looks bent, but it also looks like this just bolts out pretty easily. I don't think it should be too much of a pain to get this out. It is really nice. Supposedly this was all just pulled apart and the differential was just replaced at a Ferrari dealer down south, which is good because we can see all the blue markings and stuff. This does look like it was freshly pulled apart. Little flame modifications mounted up here, which of course contributes to the fact that this thing has spit a lot of fire. That's pretty cool. The audible experience perfected, Valvetronics Special Ops, Ferrari 599, and we got the DDE embossed on the mufflers, which is really, really cool. Okay, overall, not so bad. We're missing both more and less than I was anticipating. It was nice, all the skid plates were already pulled off and those were shipped separately, just came with the car. It's quite funny, I'm sure that guy, somebody just tried to lift the car from the middle, because if this was not modified with that cutout, you probably could with no problems and it would be just fine, but because that is modified, I'm sure it's not structurally strong enough anymore. Most of the other stuff, there's seeps and leaks from things, but that just kind of happens. If you leave a car like this sitting for a year, like this one has been, stuff like that's gonna happen. Outside of that, it definitely looks like the transmission has been recently serviced, which is good. That is congruent with the fact that it was supposed to have been kind of just rebuilt with a new diff and whatever else. We're definitely missing that pump. Overall, this car is in very good shape. There's definitely gonna be some fine tuning and some odds and ends, but we kind of knew that. It's the whole point of a project car. Yeah, overall this thing's happy. Let's check the engine oil as well as the intake tract for cleanliness and dust. Now we're gonna try and fire this thing up. I checked fluid levels that kind of we can. Of course, the brake fluid does not matter, but it is still full even though we don't have a brake master cylinder. The power steering fluid is empty, and the power steering is not currently connected to anything. There's no pump, there's no nothing. The factory pump is belt driven. We're gonna have to find one. There just isn't one. The power steering is just not hooked up whatsoever, which is fine and dandy. And then the two other fluids that matter a lot to us, the engine oil, which has a dipstick here, and the dry sump fill here, and the coolant. And coolant wise, we are all happy and good. Dipstick wise, I popped this out a second ago and there's nothing actively showing on it, but that doesn't really matter necessarily. What I'm gonna actually do is I am going to put a zip tie on the bottom of the dipstick to extend it a little bit and see if we get an oil level reading, because the first time I pulled the dipstick out, there was the tiniest little bit of oil on the bottom of it. But on a dry sump car like this, all the oil is stored in the oil tank that sits there. And then of course, as it runs, it circulates through the engine. If the car sits for a long time, it's easy for the dry sump through the equalization lines, those big ones that we were looking at underneath the car, it's easy for the oil to end up kind of accumulating in the engine, sitting for a long time. That's why if you check the oil level in a dry sump car like this, you have to have it running. It has to be up to temp so that the tank and the engine can equalize as it flows. So it's not necessarily bad that nothing's coming up on the dipstick. It's not great because it doesn't confirm oil in the system for us. But it doesn't also necessarily mean anything bad. Yes, I know it's a bit redneck, but you can see here, that's the end of the dipstick. I've used a zip tie to extend it by approximately that much. Should just give us a little bit more room to see if the oil level is just below the dipstick, which would be good to know. Let's see if this works. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Oh. We do have oil on the bottom of the dipstick. It's way below the dipstick line. Really hard to tell. The dry sump is very, very large and all the oil should have accumulated into the engine. I'm going to get the intakes all pulled apart. Intake number one, all pulled apart. This is the side that of course was still together. I've got the intake off. It's nice, it's really hard to tell with the camera, but the throttle body, everything looks super, super clean, a little bit oily, but that's kind of to be expected. The filter all looks clean. And on this side as well, I just unplugged this because of course that is the intake and then the mass airflow sensor. But I plugged off the intake manifold line right here with the missing PCV valve, as well as the line that looped to this. Ironically, the rest of this PCV line valve setup is all still intact, and I will leave that as such, of course, for the time being. But, that's all plugged off. There was one more, ironically, spot to plug off to here, right there. I just put another vacuum line plug in there. This looks all clean. I'm going to put this side all back together. Going to do the same for the other side here, which is more apart than this already, and this is more the side I'm worried about. Still not that worried. These stupid clamps are all gonna have to go. I don't know why they do this. The FF is the same. These stupid clamps, they suck so bad. Like this one is easy enough to pop off. They don't hold, those are going to go. But, we should be able to look at the same here. I'm gonna make sure that's all clean and looks the same as that guy. And then, I think we can hook this thing up to power. We can probably try and fire this thing up. We have got the intake tract all assembled. I didn't really have to put this air filter back on, but just cause why not, I did. It took me an extra 2 seconds, whether it changes any airflow characteristics or not, or anything like that. Make sure we don't suck up a fly for no reason, what have you. But I did put it on. The throttle bodies both look super, super clean. I cleaned out the intake elbows. This side was a little bit dirtier than that side for sure. I've got the battery maintainer slash boost pack plugged in and set up back here. Obviously we don't have an alternator, so keeping that hooked up while we run it for a short moment is just a good idea. Now the only thing, literally the only question mark, is the oil level, but I'm honestly not that worried about it. Everything should be good. This thing takes a ton of oil. We did get some oil show up on the zip tie on the attached to the dipstick. Let's get this lit up because, of course, like I said, I've got this hooked up. There is a battery disconnect in the trunk that's disconnected, so there's no power to the car at the moment. It's also a good idea. I'm glad we lifted it because we don't have any brakes. So I want the rear tires in the air for any rotating that they could or could not do, because outside of the e-brake, I don't have a way to stop them, which is not good. I gotta be careful not to clock myself in the head with this because these trunk struts are dead. We can see there is our turn on. So now, theoretically, we should have juice. Take a seat. 599 GTB. A-brake system failure. Based on that, also indeed does make sense. I'm kind of leaning towards we just send it. Let's get the camera set up. Let's try and fire this thing up. This thing sounds very loud and very happy. The engine bay is super, super quiet. Everything seems pretty happy under here. The dash isn't freaking out, anything like that. It shows that the door is open. And of course the electronics are lower because, well, we don't have an alternator. But this is the first time that we know of that this car has ran in a hot minute. And so far, so good. So I'm curious. Yeah, there we go. We're starting to see oil climb up, and the oil even looks pretty clean. This is sick. I'm sure this is gonna ruin me. This car is supposed to sound insane. Oh my Lord. There's nothing leaking under it either. I'm gonna call this a win. I am about to go get on the computer and get ordering parts so we can get this thing all together. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.